Welcome to another video with Adelaide RV and Road Ahead Mobile Way. Today we're going to go through a few comparisons with some of the popular towing vehicles that are out there and the things to look for with regards to their weights, their GVM and their payloads and the differences. And then we're also going to have a look at some caravans and just go through a couple things to look for and how to read the plates on a van if you're looking at purchasing one. And a couple other little things to look for that may help you in your search for a new caravan or new vehicle. So first of all, what we're going to talk about is some of the most popular vehicles that we've seen while we've been weighing. That would be the Ford Ranger, the Everest, and also the 200 series Land Cruiser, or even a Nissan Patrol. These are the probably four most popular vehicles we've seen when towing. So we're going to go through quickly today, we're going to go through about the GVM on the vehicle, so the gross vehicle mass, what the vehicle can weigh maximum. We'll go through the GCM of these vehicles, so what the maximum combined is going to be. And then we'll also go through the payload, so what the vehicle can carry as standard. And then we'll talk about a couple options if you are getting close to your payload or close to your towing capacities. If you want to know more information or in depth about more of the weights and how to work out the weight limits and stuff, Jeb's already done a video on the Adelaide RV YouTube page. That'll give you more in-depth information about the GVM, GCM payloads and all that. Today we're just going to touch on the vehicle specific stuff. Okay, so first of all we're going to talk about the Ford Ranger. This is a Wild Track 2 litre. So there's two variations, there's a 3 litre and a 2 litre. The weight's changed by about 50 kilos. So we'll start off with the curb weight. So the curb weight of this vehicle from the factory is 2341. Now that's not taking into account the bull bar either, so that's something else to think about. We've got a GVM or gross vehicle mass of 3280. And then that leaves us a payload of 939 kilos. So that's not a bad payload from the factory out of the box. One thing to think about when you are looking at purchasing a vehicle or you are going to purchase one and do a few things is all of these accessories, even tires and wheels, come out of your payload. So when you're buying a car, look at the car as a whole and work out roughly if that weight is going to translate to what you need. So one thing to think about is something as simple as a bull bar weighs 60 kilos. So now you've got to take 60 kilos off your 939 kilos of payload on this vehicle just from this bull bar. And that can also go into if you put wheels, tires, if you put a canopy on, all that starts coming off your payload. So the GCM on the Ford Ranger for this specific one here is 6350. Like I said, the 2 litre is a little bit lighter, so it has a 50 kilo less GCM. And then the V6 has a 50 kilo heavier, so 6,400 kilos is the GCM for the V6. So now we're going to talk about the Everest. So this is the V6 Sport. This is also available in a 2 litre. And same thing with the Ranger, the weights vary by about 50 kilos depending on the engine you pick. So we've started off with the curb weight is 2458 on this one. And we've got a GVM of 3150. And that leaves us a payload of 682 kilos. So that's about 300 kilos less than the Ranger just from the factory with this vehicle. And then we've got a GCM on this of 6350. So very similar to the Ranger as well. So almost identical on paper as for weight, GVM and stuff, but the problem with the Everest is the payload can become really tight, especially if you've got a van that's upwards of 250 kilos on the bull. Once again, that will come out of your payload. If you add a bull bar, there's 60 kilos off. Rims, tires, there's some more weight added. So with the wagons generally, you have to be a little bit more careful with where you put things and the weights you are carrying because they don't have as big a payload from the factory as the Ute version of that vehicle does. That goes the same for most other wagon versus Ute. Utes generally have a bigger payload from the get-go. Wagons don't. But depending on which one you buy, there's usually an option where you can get a GVM upgrade or in some cases a GCM upgrade as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the 200 series. So this is probably one of the most popular vehicles, tow vehicles that there is in Australia. The problem with these are they are a great tow vehicle, but once again, being a wagon, the payload is really small on them. So to start with, the curb weight is 2750 and they've got a GVM of 3350 from the factory. So that only leaves 610 kilos of payload. So as you can see, these two are very similar in regards to their payload and what they can carry. All right, so as you can see, this has a bull bar, it's got bigger tires, so all that adds up, taking away from that payload. So what can you do for this vehicle to maximize what it can actually do. So there's things, GVM upgrades and GCM upgrades. Now there's various companies that make them. Lovell's seem to make a lot and different levels of GVM upgrade. ARB make them, Ironman, there's a lot. So just look in your local area, make some phone calls, and I'm sure there's someone that can help you out. So this one here has had a GVM upgrade. So the GVM has gone up from 3350 to 4015. So that takes it from 610 kilos of payload to 1,150. So as you can see now, this car has just become more capable than the Ute regards to payload by doing an upgrade. The other thing with the Land Cruiser is it has a big GCM of 6850. So it means you can pull a big 3-ton van and still load up your car with a reasonable amount of weight, and it's going to be able to handle it really easily. With all three vehicles, they've all got the same max brake towing and the same tow ball download. So they're all rated to 3,500 kilos brake towing and 350 tow ball download. So if you were to take that 350 tow ball download on a standard Land Cruiser and you'd use the whole 350, that's going to leave you less than 300 kilos in the car for all your stuff, people, dogs, cats, whatever it is that you take, drawers, everything like that. So it's really important to watch what you do put in your car, especially if you're running a standard setup. The Utes, on the other hand, they've got a little bit more leeway, so you can load them up a little bit more. They do handle the weight better due to the springs in the rear. So yep, if you're looking for something out of the box that you just want to get in tow and start with, a Ute's probably a good option if your budget is limited and you don't want to spend extra money on a vehicle to upgrade it to get it to where you need it to be. I'm going to talk about the difference between the 2-litre and the V6, specifically in the Ranger, but this can apply to the Everest as well. So with the Ranger, if you're looking at a tow vehicle and you want to kind of future-proof just in case you want to upgrade your van, you get a bigger van, or you might think that you're going to carry a lot more stuff, the difference between the 2-litre and the V6, I would recommend the V6 due to the fact that there is actually GCM upgrades available through Lovell's for the V6, but not the 2-litre. So all that's going to do is allow you to get a bigger GCM and allow you to tow something a little bit bigger, or have that leeway that you can tow that bigger van if you find the one that you really like and you end up selling or upgrading. So that's just something to think about, is trying to future-proof yourself. So if you're going to buy something, try and buy it right the first time, and it can save you a lot of money and hassle in the long run, other than trying to have to update your vehicle because you want this brand new big van and your car's not capable. So we're going to talk about if you've already got the vehicle and you're looking at buying a caravan. So you don't have to go out and buy a brand new car, but there is a couple of things you can do to help you decide on what van you want to buy. So the first thing you want to look at is your vehicle itself and what the towing capacity is. So what the max brake towing is. There's the first thing you'll start with, and then you want to work backwards from there. What's the tow ball download? Some vehicles, Pajeros for instance, the older model Pajeros, they might have a 3-ton towing, but their ball weight max is only 180. That really doesn't add up when you're talking bigger, heavier vans. Also, what you need to take into account is the tare weight or curb weight of the vehicle, which usually includes fuel, and then talk about the GVM, and then work out what your payload is. An easy way to get around this is to contact your local mobile weigh guy, whoever it is, whatever state you're in, and I'm sure they will go through a couple scenarios that they've already had with vehicles they've already weighed that might give you a bit of peace of mind, or say yes or no, that's probably going to be too heavy, that's not. This can save you a lot of hassle and money in the long run, and you get the right caravan for your vehicle. You end up having a better trip, it tows better. There's a lot of positives to actually doing the research and working out what your weight limits are. It also helps the longevity of your vehicle as well. You've invested a lot of money on a new caravan, new car, whatever it is, or even your old car, and you don't want to ruin it by just overloading it. Let's just say you've already got the vehicle, so you've got a Ranger, you know your weights are going to be good, but you just want to enhance the experience that you're having while towing because it tends to wail a bit or the back end sags. So an easy, cheap solution that works really well is airbags. So airbags are a great tool for getting your vehicle level and helping take some of that load. Now, they're not going to increase your rear axle limit or give you a bigger GVM or anything like that, but they will help get that van and ride level and stop some of that bouncing when you hit bumps and things like that. And then the beauty with airbags is once you're done towing, you can just let the air out and you go back to a standard ride and you don't feel any difference. Now, if you want to go a bit more high level because you're going to carry more weight, you need more clearance, you're going to go further, bigger places, then an upgrade of suspension is, I would highly recommend. It changes the dynamics of how the car handles without the weight on, and then it actually comes into its own once you've put the Caravan on and you're towing down the road. What it helps do is keep the car nice and stable and steady on the road, keeps you nice and flat and level, and it stops a lot of that sagging. Now, obviously that might not be in everyone's budget, so there is a couple other options you can look at doing as well. So not just airbags, there's also weight distribution hitches. They're a great tool if you don't have a massive budget and you want to tow a van and you want it to be a bit more stable, then by all means use them. And what they do is actually help spread the load between the front and the rear, so between the front axle of your car and your Caravan. That also helps take out some of that bouncing. They're a cheaper option if you want to just try and get a nice ride just for towing if you're doing caravan parks and a lot of road driving. If you're going to go off-road though, weight distribution hitches are not the ideal situation because your van will want to do different things on dirt roads and you want to let it move a little bit. So there's a couple options if you're looking at upgrading your car for towing. One thing we recommend at Road Ahead is you're not on your limit. So don't go buy a Caravan if you can tow 3.5 tonne. Don't go buy a van that is going to weigh 3.5 tonne. What you want to do, or try and do if possible, and as best as practically possible, is get under your limits comfortably. So what that means is you want to have 100, 200 kilos of payload left in your van, and if you can, in your vehicle as well. All that's going to do, it's going to make a safer ride. It's going to be more comfortable, so you're not maxing everything. And then also it gives you options. If you ever want to take like an extra fridge because you're doing a long trip, you need to take fuel. It gives you the option to be able to take those extra items and not have to take something out to put something in. You want to be able to travel comfortably and for a long time if that's what you want to do. So by having that extra payload, not maxing out your limits, it's going to help your vehicle, it's going to help with towing, help your fuel economy, and it's also going to give you those options later. If you do want to do a long trip and you need 40, 50, 60 litres of fuel and another 100 litres of water, you've got the capacity to carry it and you're still within your limits and legal. So now we're going to talk about caravans and some of the numbers you want to look for in buying a caravan and the differences. So what we've done, we've got two almost identical vans. I say almost. One's a double bunk, one's a 3-bunker. They're the same size, 19.6. They're both litres. One's a gold, one's an Xpedition. So we're going to talk about the differences and the weight that comes into that. And maybe if you are picking a van, think about your weights and do you need off-road suspension? You may not. If you're going to do a lot of caravan parks and a few rough roads, will something like this be fine and then keep you well under your limits? Or if you need to go hardcore, then that obviously means that you're going to probably need to upgrade your tow vehicle depending on your situation. So we'll start with this one. So it's a 19.6 litre. All right, we've got a tow weight of 24.28 and an aggregate trailer mass. So the max it can weigh is 30.78, and that leaves you with 650 kilos of payload in the van. You've also got a ball weight of 177 from the factory. So I'll quickly talk about the ball weight. So the ball weight is from the factory 177 kilos. That is the lightest it's going to be. Once you put anything in the front, it's going to increase your tow ball weight. You add water, increases your tow ball weight. So when picking a van, it is good to look at that ball weight number and go, yep, it's 177. But what we need to think about as well is where are the storage hatches? Is there a toolbox? How long's the drawbar? Because that can also affect your ball weight limit. All right. Another thing that I like to look at as well is I'll get underneath the van and have a look where the water tanks are situated. If they're both in front of the axles, that's going to increase your ball weight when you fill the water tanks up. When we're talking about ball weight, there's also a max permissible. Now, not every van has this on their plate, but this one does. So the max ball weight that this caravan is legally allowed to take is 350 kilos. So if you want to work out off your max, 350 kilos, that becomes payload in your car. Speaking of payload, the other thing to think about with your payload, it's got 650 kilos. Now what we want to take into account is water, because you do need water. If you ever got pulled through and weighed, generally they'll add the water in even if you're empty. What we don't want to do is get our van underweight by dropping water. Okay, so with the water, if this has got two 80-litre tanks, that's going to give us 160 kilos taken out of our payload before we've even put our stuff in it. All right, so another reason why we recommend towing with water is because it keeps the weight down and low to the ground in your caravan. And I've found personally it helps with stability while driving. So, but purely up to you. So now we're going to look at this Xpedition. So it's the same size. It's got one less bunk, but it is effectively the same layout inside, just with one less bunk. So This van has a tow weight of 2742. So it's about 300 kilos heavier than the last one we looked at. It has an ATM of 3422, so the maximum it can weigh is 3422. So that's getting up towards your 3.5 brake towing capacity. And then it's also got a payload of 650 kilos. So it's still got a significant payload, but once again, we need to think about water as the main item before we even start packing. So let's subtract that from that 650. So you're gonna take about 180 kilos off of that 650, and that's gonna give you what's left in your payload or what you should try and pack to. This one also has a ball weight of 155. Now the reason why, there's a couple reasons why, but one of the reasons is it's got an extended drawbar. So what that's doing is that's actually spreading the weight between the axles and the ball, and it's actually, the percentage split is actually less than what it is on the shorter drawbar. The beauty of having an extended drawbar is it is actually gonna help spread that load, and it can potentially reduce your ball weight once you're maxed out, loaded, compared to a short drawbar. You'll find that generally your ball weight will be lower on an extended drawbar than it will on a shorter drawbar, but in turn, your axles will actually be heavier for the same amount of stuff. So that's just something to take into consideration as well. Same again, if we're gonna look at this van, for instance, let's take into account everything. Why is it heavier? So first of all, we'll start with the suspension. So this has got a independent suspension. So that's gonna be about 170 kilos of payload, or 170 kilos extra weight on the van just from the suspension. Then we're gonna add in all these bars. So all the bars add up. You've got a toolbox, that's gonna come into play with your weight. There's also a jerry can holder on the rear. So all these things slowly add up. Then we might want to talk about how many solar panels on it. That can also add weight. What type of batteries in it. So generally, most vans come with an AGM battery, and a good rule is a lithium battery is about half the weight of an AGM for the equivalent size. So 100 amp hour might be about 25 to 30 kilos in an AGM, and then you'll be about 12.5 to 15 kilos for 100 amp hour lithium. So that's a nice way you can take some weight out as well. When you're looking at buying a caravan or picking a caravan, there's a couple things that we're going to go through, and that is, first of all, picking the caravan that's right for your situation. So if I'm just going to caravan parks and I'm not going to be doing much off-grid, I probably don't need an Xpedition. I could probably get away with something like this that's only 2,400 kilos tear as opposed to 27. So already I'm 300 kilos underweight just by picking the right van for what I need. The payload's the same, so you're not gonna miss out on anything extra. And you don't need extra solar, you don't need the battery. So just think about what you're actually gonna be using it for, right? Secondly is if you're looking at a van, go have a look at the plate on that van. So don't just rely on a brochure, because what happens is sometimes they will make a van and the weights can be different because the van that you're looking at might have a toolbox on the front that isn't generally on the vans when they're bought out from the factory. So that now is a different weight to the one without a toolbox, things like that. So just go through the van, ask questions, ask the dealer, like how do they work out the tear weight? Does that include gas bottles? Does that include the awning? What does that include? That way you can work out what your weights are and what your limits are based off of your scenario. That is us done for today. So just remembering that all this information is very general. Your specific situation may be different, but we just want to go over a general outline of what to look for, what types of cars are available, what payloads there are, how to work out that payload. So it's all general advice. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out and we will happily help make that decision. And there's usually people in your local area that can also help with that as well. So reach out to local people, go to your local dealership, speak to people, get the right advice from the start. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Adelaide RV YouTube channel.